In the last video, we were able to inject our Mobx State Tree into our class component, and then we were able to access the properties of our Mobx State Tree via props, which is very helpful. In this video, we're going to dive into Mobx State Tree Actions. In our Mobx State Tree, essentially on our types.model, you may have saw this earlier, but if you actually come down and do a dot afterwards and hit control space, you'll see a whole bunch of other methods that you can do on your Mobx State Tree node. So in this case, we're actually going to use actions. And I'm going to give myself some real estate, so I'm just going to put this on the next line. And typically what you do is this is actually a function, and it takes in a parameter, and we typically specify self, and this is going to end up being an arrow function. And what you'll essentially do in this actions function is just specify a list of functions that can alter this node, or really the entire tree, in some way, shape, or form. And also remember, during our presentation, actions are the only way that you're supposed to edit your tree. You're not supposed to do it in any other way. So anything that you want to do to edit the tree should go right here. What we're going to do for the employer node, we're going to create a function that allows you to add a new employee to the employer. So to do that, we'll just specify a function. And this is the best way to do it for TypeScript, is you just specify a flat out classical function and then the name of the function. And I'll specify add employee, or sorry, no, I'll just do new employee. And for this function, I'm actually going to use two parameters. The first one's going to be name, and if you're using TypeScript, specify the type, and I'll do string. And then I'll do hours worked, and I'm going to make that of type number. Now this function, I guess there's one thing that we'll need to do is we'll need to grab a unique ID first. So I'll do const ID, and I'll set that equal to UUID, which is the library that we imported in the beginning. I'll make sure to import that, and I'll do dot and v4. This is just another way to grab a random string. And now I'll have the unique ID. And now this is where the magic happens in Mobx State Tree. We'll run a function called apply snapshot. And this essentially allows me to use an immutable copy, or to create a new immutable copy of our tree. So make sure you import apply snapshot from Mobx State Tree. And then within here, it takes two parameters. One is the instance that you're changing, and in this case, I'm just going to grab the self, which is a representation of the model or the employer node. So I'll type in self, and I'll do comma, and then I'll specify the new snapshot. And an easy way to do this is you basically can just take self, and you can use the spread operator. So I'll do ... self, and then any new parameters that I want to add. In this case, I'm just going to do the employees object, and this is going to be the only thing that's going to be different. And this employees is just going to take in a new array, and this new array is going to be, the first item is going to be our new employee, which is going to be the ID that we just created. So I'll do ID and then comma the name and hours worked that we passed in through parameters here. And then after this object, I'm going to basically specify the existing array. So I'll just do self.employees, and I'm going to do a spread operator on it. So this essentially creates a new array with our new employee at the beginning. I'll save that. And then at the end of this actions function, we need to make sure that we export, or sorry, no, not export, return all of our functions within here. So in our case, we just have one, so I'll just do new employee. Now if we save this, and let's just run over to the employer class again, and let's just check out our root tree and see if we see anything different. If you just do root tree dot, hit control space, you'll see employer, hit dot again and control space, and now you'll see a new item here called new employee, and this is the action that we just created. So anytime that we want to create a new employee, we can just access it through props and run it right there. Now I do want to hook this up to the app, but there's a few things that we have to do on this app in order to make it work. That includes creating some new components down here in the render method, and a few new state parameters, and a few new class functions. So I'll go ahead and start doing that right now. So I'm going to add in 2 state variables. I'm going to add in employee name, and this is initially just going to be an empty string, and I'll also specify hours worked. These are going to be form elements, so I'll need to put them in state. And you'll also, if you're using TypeScript, you'll have to add them up here. So I'll do employee name of type string and hours worked of type string. And then I also want to create class methods here just to handle the change with these. So I'll do change employee name, and I'll just set that to an arrow function, and it's going to take in a parameter of event. I'm just going to specify e, and I'm just going to do any here for simplicity. Then I'll basically from this, I'll grab the employee name from e.target.value, const employee name from e.target.value, and then I'll do this dot set state, just standard form stuff, employee name. All right, I'll do the same thing here, and I'm just going to copy this to save time. We'll just do the same thing here for hours worked. I'll save that, and I'll do one more thing here that's form specific. I'll just create another class method called onSubmit, and I'll just set that equal to an arrow function, and I'll just do, you know, any just like the others. And then I'll do an e.preventDefault, which prevents the page from refreshing. I'll grab the items from state, this dot state, and then now that I have these, I need to do this TypeScript hack again, unfortunately. Not a big deal. I'll just destructure our root store from props. Equals this dot props, and then I'll do if root tree is null, then return null. And after this, I can now do root tree dot employer, and then dot our new employee action that we created. And this will take in our employee name as the first parameter. The second parameter, I'll take in hours worked. However, there's a little typing thing here. Here in the form, we're using a string, but over in the action, we're actually expecting a number. So I'll just essentially cast this to an int, which is no biggie. Parse int. All right. So that should be good and ready to go. Now we can go into our render method and actually hook up our new employee form, which is should be rather simple. So after our HR tag, what I'll do is I'll just add in, a P tag, and I'll just specify new employee, which indicates the start of our new employee form. I'll create a form component, which is really simple, and I'll have an on submit submit method, and I'll set that equal to our class method of this dot on submit. And within this form, I'm just going to have a few general things. I'm going to do a P tag with name, and I'll do name colon, and then I'll do an input field, and this one's going to be my name input. So this is going to have a property of value equals this dot state dot employee name, and then on change, and this is going to be the class method this dot, I believe this is change employee name. All right, and I'll just copy these, and I'll change this for hours worked. The value is going to be hours worked, and change is going to be change hours worked. So pretty simple stuff. The last thing I'll need is just a button to submit, but I'll just do a break thing in there just to force a new line, and then I'll do button, and then I'll do submit. All right. I want to do a little bit of cleanup here. I want to grab this employee name, and I don't want to specify this dot state. I just think that's annoying. So I'll do const equals this dot state, employee name, and hours worked. Then I'll just come down here and blow those away, just to make it look a little bit cleaner, and save that. All right, so now I have a form that allows me to create new employees, but I have nowhere in here to actually list the employees out. So I'll need to do that as well, and I'm just going to do something really simple. Before I do that, let me just make sure that this is rendering appropriately. So I'll come back into our website. All right, that's no problem. Let me fix that. It doesn't like this thing, so let me just import UUID from UUID. Sorry about that. All right, this looks a lot better. So this name thing in here, let me just make sure I can do a new name, and I can do an hour. Okay, that looks okay. So let me go back to the code editor, and I need some way to render an employee onto the screen. And then down here, after the form, I'm going to render the list of employees. So what I'll do is on the components directory, I'll create a new file called employee.tsx. And in here, I'll create my employee component. So I'm going to try to do a really simple component here. So let me just make sure I import React like I normally do. And I'll do class employee component extends react.component. And I'll do a render return, and I'll do just like a div, and then I'll do like just like a p tag, and I want to do the employee's name, but I need to handle this as input somehow. So there's a few things I can do to make that work. First, I'll export this as a singleton, the export employee component. And let's see, at the top, I'm going to add the TypeScript typings, which are interfaces. So the interface employee component props. And this is going to have one property, and this is actually going to be an employee, and the actual type is going to be the employee type that we grab from here, which represents our basically our employee node. So I'll say employee and import that. State for now, I think this will just be blank. And I'll pass this into the component. Employee component state. I'll save that. Prettier, reformat it. All right. Now I'll make sure I add, since I am using a tree here, let me add the observer decorator. We don't need the inject decorator yet because we're not directly injecting the props in here. We're kind of doing it through, we're going to end up doing it through a traditional prop passing. But we do still need the observer decorator. And make sure you import that from Mobx React. And now in the render method, let's go ahead and grab the name and hours worked from this.props. So I'll do const, I'll do a destructure from this.props.employee. I should have access to name and hours worked. Yeah, I'll also have access to the ID, which is nice. So I'll say hours worked and name. And then down here, I'll just render that to the screen. Specify name and hours worked. And actually what I'll do, let me just do a little bit more. I'll give this a template string, and I'll actually specify name, and then I'll just pass in the variable here, just to make it look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. All right, let me save that. All right, now let me go back into employer. And remember down here at the bottom of the list, what we'll do is after this form, I'll create a horizontal rule just to give us some separation. And right here, I'll actually render our list. So let's see, on our root tree, we'll do root tree. We'll want to grab off the employees. So if I do employer.employees, employees, if you remember correctly, this is an array on our node. So you can actually do a dot map on this. And I'll specify an employee parameter. And I'll return some JSX. But I'm just going to do one component here, and that's the employee component that I just created. And this is going to take in the employee as a property. So save that, and hopefully everything worked appropriately. So let me refresh. Now let me try to create a new employee. I'll say Corey and 9 hours of work. I'll submit, and now I see it down here. And I see I made a big no-no in React land. I forgot to specify a key. So let me come back over to the code, and I'll specify key equals employee.id. All right, and Corey, 8 hours of work, submit. All right, and let me just add a few more. Fred, 14 hours. Nancy, 20 hours. All right, so one thing I do want to point out is obviously, this is rendering appropriately. This is really nice. But also on the right, you can see in our console, we're actually getting these snapshot outputs. And we can tell the difference between each one of these snapshots. So if I just expand these out a little bit, yep. We've got 3 different snapshots. The first one, there's just only one employee, that's Corey. When I created the second snapshot, when I added the second employee, a whole new snapshot was created, and this snapshot created a second item in the array. And same thing with the third item. When I added Nancy, a third snapshot was created. So this is our immutable component of our state tree. Anytime we make an alteration to our state tree, a whole new snapshot is created. So an individual component of the tree is not mutable. The entire tree has to be mutated all at once, which creates the whole immutability principle of Mobx State Tree. All right, so I think that's going to be it for this video. Just to kind of wrap up, what we did here is we did have to do a lot of boilerplate with our application because we had to create a new employee component. But we went ahead and did that, and we used the observer decorator in order to listen for updates on the tree or on this node. And then on the employer side, we used a new action that we created called new employee, and this thing essentially took in a new snapshot which we were able to view in the console. This new snapshot created a new employee, and it added a new employee to this list, and obviously that list rendered some JSX from our employee component. So we did a lot there, so I appreciate you sticking with me. In the next lesson, we're going to do a little bit more. We're going to go into computed values. There is another item on Mobx State Tree called views. So this allows us to do computed variables, and we can take advantage of some memoization, which is really handy. So I'll see you in the next video.